confidential in my work for a few years, so to be in such a legit place as an artist is a great, great feeling. So I'm certainly humbly grateful to be here. So I've given a few more talks, and it always boils down to two topics, the how and the why. So I'll start with the how first. As you stated, I've been a graphic designer for 25 years now. And when I was in school, I was taking just as many art classes as I was design classes. I think in the back of my head, I thought, I'll be an artist eventually. But the practicality of getting a job is almost the same thing you said. The practicality of that, worrying about being a starving artist, had me focus on design because I knew I'll eventually get a job doing that. Even though deep inside I was like, I should just be an artist. But when you're raised by a Sunday school teacher and a staff sergeant in the Air Force, you do the practical thing when you're 20, 21. So I went the design route, and I love design. And halfway through that, getting that degree, the computer arrived. So a friend of mine ran up to me, because we've been avoiding this production class forever, this hand production class, because it was so expensive to buy all the equipment. So he runs up to me and he takes me and he says, "You need to go to the 5th floor of the art room." Like, what are you talking about? Go up there, room full of brand new Macintosh. I'd never seen a Macintosh before. So then, now suddenly, we have this tool that we don't really know it yet, but it's about to expand our ability to be creative. And it's about to give us all of the control that used to be spread between 4 or 5 different people. So what that meant was, you not only were you creative, but you thought about production now too. And you thought about the finished piece more than you would have if you were just being a creative. So doing that for 20 years, making logos, making, laying out books, doing websites, doing all that sort of stuff, when the art hit me, that was the tool that was in front of me. So it was just a natural progression to stay with the tool that I've been making a living with. So to the how, these are digital collage, and I'm stuck on that phrase because I don't know if it's quite right, but every body, every face you see has been put together from different sources. I started off with family photos. When I ran out of those, I started using my own face. When I ran out of those, I just started to create my own new noses for my own nose. I would just spread it a little, or I would make it a little longer, do something like that. So these people don't actually exist. Like every face has been constructed from several different sources. Every body has been constructed from those legs, the feet, the arms, everything came from a completely different source. And the thing I like about that is it adds a sense of awkwardness. Like some of those body parts don't belong together. And it speaks perfectly to the awkwardness of being Black in America. It's a perfect metaphor of all the shape-shifting we have to do to get through the day. I take a ton of photos just with my iPhone. I walk around, I take photos of texture. I've been photographing the bricks in here. I've been photographing the back alleys all through this neighborhood because I know I'm going to be able to use those textures later. So, the cracks in the faces, the clouds for the cops, the graffiti, like all the things that you see were a photo I took of something.
That's a very graphic designer thing to do.
Yeah. And there are patterns. There's a pattern in a shirt that really was, it's over there. And the red top, the red headdress, the green shirt was the pattern. I was sitting in a doctor's office, and I was just kind of waiting for my turn, and it was just a pattern on the chair. We just took a photo of it. Didn't think, I don't know how I'm going to use this later. A year and a half later, I'm using it to create the fabric for that shirt. So that's essentially the how. Now, the why is, I also think, pretty clear. Right around 2013, 14, and 15, we started to hear a lot about police brutality. We started to hear certain instances of violence against black bodies that in some way or fashion had been documented. Some of them were actually documented with camera. Some weren't, but there was enough information around them that we got a really good idea of what happened. Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Philando Castile. And what hit me like a ton of bricks was that I needed to be making art talking about these issues. I needed to do what I could to represent my experience as a black man in Texas, as a black man in America, what it means, and how can I use art to do that. But what hit me even harder is that I had a long list of names in my head going back to the 50s. If you go all the way back to Emmett Till, Yusef Hawkins, Latasha Harlins, there's so many names of injustices that when it kind of hit me that I had always had that information, I felt really guilty. I felt really horrible that, what was I doing? I had this desire to be an artist, this creative skill, and it took all these years to get to the point where, okay, I need to start saying something, I need to start doing something. So, what started off as the true start of me making art was something that I used to call 30-minute poster, which is what I called it. And it was a way to get out of a creative block. I would just grab a couple of images, sit down on the computer, put on a kitchen timer, and just start playing. And when that timer went off, stopped, flattened the file, couldn't edit it anymore, whatever I had, and it was 95% garbage. But that 5%, there was a little spark of something there. And I had done something with a photo of Muhammad Ali, I think it was. And it kind of like, oh, I think this is what I'm doing. That's what I thought to myself. And started making the work, early 2015, this particular subject matter. And there's something in Austin called East Austin Studio Tour, and there's also a West Austin Studio Tour. So this was going to be the first time I ever showed my work anywhere. And I was incredibly nervous, didn't know what to expect. And it was me with a bunch of other artists, so there was some insulation in it. It was me and 19 other artists. As people started to come in, one of the things that started happening, which has always happened, is that people would huddle around each piece, and I could see them having conversations. And I could see them scanning the room to see who the artist might be. And I would always be standing off to the side, and they would look at the piece and they would kind of argue with each other. They would look at the piece and then they would start looking for the artist. And they would see me standing off to the side looking at them like that. They would go. They would walk over to me. They would either be excited about what they were saying or they would want to argue. And that became so great because that was a conversation that I thought, well, this is a conversation we need to have. So the idea that a piece of art can make two people from two completely different backgrounds meet and have a conversation about race, have a conversation about the United States, have a conversation about the police that we never would have had. Like me and a 65-year-old white woman would never talk about police brutality together. But art caused that conversation to happen. So that became my why. That became the reason for doing this. And over the course of the last 5 years, things have frankly, just gotten better. I specifically brought an old piece, which is the perfect square piece. That was done in 2016. And that piece was done, this far left with the pink shirt, was done 2 months ago. So there's just the practicality of my process. You can kind of tell that it's just gotten better. And it's gotten to the point where it's almost hiding the element of collage. And I don't know, that's not really, I wasn't doing that on purpose, it just sort of happened. So that's why I said at the very beginning, I don't know if this is digital collage anymore. I don't know if it's digital painting anymore. I honestly don't know what to call it. So that's going to be my problem. I'll deal with that. But I do think it's worth sort of looking at that particular piece and then any other piece actually, because everything else is pretty new, and sort of seeing what I'm trying to accomplish. So you'll see the oversized noses and mouths. So that is talking about Western beauty standards. It's talking about the reason Philando Castile was pulled over in the first place, because he had a widespread nose. So think about that. That man's dead because he had a widespread nose. If that had been me in the car, they wouldn't have pulled me over. They would have said, oh, he doesn't look like we're looking for. So that's that. So I want to talk about things like that. I like talking about, there's this current movement to try to avoid talking about black trauma. And I get it. I understand why people don't want to engage with it. But to me, I feel like if we stop talking about it, it eventually gets swept under the rug. So I refuse to not talk about it. So a piece like this is one of the pieces that typically causes an argument. So some people think, oh, you're celebrating or you're glorifying or you're shining a light on a specific painful legacy. And I'm like, yeah, I am. That's exactly what I'm doing. But the faces that you see, you will never see a face on any of my work that looks like the person is defeated. That looks like the person is not either resistant or nonplussed or not courageous in what is being subjected to. There's not one defeated face anymore. And in fact, a lot of the faces are straight up defiant. Some of the faces, it's just a direct stare at the viewer because I want that confrontation. There are really specific details that you have to walk up close to see. So this texture in the neck, and some of this goes back to me being a designer and just wanting to embed meaning in things. So let me talk about being a designer real quick, a quick little segue. So as a designer, you've got to create a logo or a brochure or a poster that communicates something really quick. So since I've been doing that for 20 years, that's what's happened with the art. Like, I'm almost designing art in that it's an artistic process. I don't have a client. I just want to get something off my chest. But there's always a message in something. There's always this sort of hidden message or a hidden little secret. So the textures there are handwritten names from a slave registry. The eyes are, so minstrel shows were illegal for a while, and you couldn't have a ticket. So the way to give a ticket to someone was to take a coin that already existed and hammer something new into it, and then that was your ticket to go to the minstrel show. So some of the eyes are photos of those coins. Some of the eyes are, and this is a little bit of my, like, I can't help bringing things up and sticking to people. There's a particular coin that the British struck in 1831 to celebrate the fact that they had abolished slavery. But what they didn't abolish was collecting all the money from the colonies. So that coin is particularly ironic to me, to use money to celebrate the fact that, oh, we don't do that anymore, we're still clocking the dollar, right? So those types of symbols, I've been having fun using old buttons from the women's suffrage movement, because that's my little nod to everything women have to go through. It's also my nod to the struggle of keeping voting accessible to everyone. It's a little nod to, it may be a little abstract, but to me, it's a nod to women's rights. It's just a little detail in there to say, hey, we're all being subjected by something. We're all being controlled by something. I think as far as continuing to talk about the why, my hope is that there can be discussions about race. There can be discussions between people who normally wouldn't have had a discussion. And it's really interesting, the people that decide they want to have an argument about something. I'll tell you a little story about Dallas. I was in Dallas for the Other Art Fair. That's what it's called, the Other Art Fair. And was there for 4 days. And I had a piece that it was a young black man in a gold spun suit, and his necktie was a noose. And it was right over my left shoulder. So as I'm watching the people walk by, I can see what piece they look at, and I know what they're reacting to. And as the people are walking by, they see that piece. Black people would see it, they would stop, they would take it in, they would look at me and they would nod, and then they would go on. The only people who wanted to argue were white people, and it was like, what's happening here? And it kind of hit me like, oh, okay, there's some stuff you need to work out. There's some things in your head that when you see a black man in the news and it makes you angry, and it wasn't angry in support, it was angry, why are you showing me? That was the anger. So I was like, all right, let's dig into that. Let's go ahead and have that argument right here in the middle of this auditorium, in the middle of this art show. Let's talk about why you're upset for seeing a black man in the news. And that conversation almost always ended up in a very positive end. Like, that person walked away from me, knowing how I felt about the world a little more. And I knew how she felt about the world a little more. And that may not solve everything, but she's probably going to talk to some people she knows who felt the same way, and just maybe that idea spreads a little bit. And from my side, empathy with what it feels like to be almost automatically considered racist in certain situations. I can have a little empathy of what that feels like. So that's the hope, that some of these conversations can help us collectively grow a little bit. That's probably the biggest why I'm doing